Good morning. Today we are going to talk about a new reaction, which is combustion reaction or oxidation. So, you know that the reactive gas in the air is oxygen. So, when elements burn in air, they react with the oxygen and produce compounds called oxides. So when any element react with oxygen, they will produce oxides. These reactions are called combustion reactions. So if you look at these two equations, we will find that it's a general formula for or general word equation for reaction with oxygen. So if metal react with oxygen, that will produce metal oxide. For example, iron and oxygen will produce iron oxide. Copper and oxygen, they will produce metal oxide. So any metal react with oxygen, that will produce the name of metal with oxide. What about non-metals? Non-metals like sulfur, carbon, whatever. So non-metal, when they react with oxygen, they will produce non-metal dioxide. For example, of carbon react with oxygen, direct copper react with two oxygen particles to form carbon dioxide. Or sulfur with oxygen, they also will produce sulfur dioxide. So let's complete those chemical reactions. So when magnesium react with oxygen, what they will produce? Sulfur when they react with oxygen, carbon and oxygen, iron and oxygen, copper and oxygen. All of them are combustion reactions. So all of them will produce oxides. So magnesium and oxygen, they will produce magnesium oxide. Sulfur and oxygen, so sulfur here is non-metal. So sulfur, when it reacts with oxygen, it will produce sulfur dioxide. And carbon also, it's not metal, so it will when it will react with oxygen, it will produce carbon dioxide. Iron, it's a metal. When metal react with oxygen, it will produce iron oxide. And copper also is a metal. When it reacts with oxygen, it will produce copper oxide. So please write them in your notebook and try to complete the equations alone. So after writing them, please check your answer from those equations. Okay. So let's answer summary questions together. Summary questions. Question number 1. What is another word for combustion? As we say, we have 3 names for combustion. The first one, oxidation. The second one, burning, and the combustion itself. So already combustion means burning. So burning, combustion, oxidation, all of them have the same meaning. Okay, let's go to question number 2, which is why can combustion reactions be described as examples of oxidation? If you noticed that all equations react with oxygen, so oxygen is one of the reactants. So because oxygen is chemically added to a reactant, so we can call it oxidation. Third question, write a word equation for the combustion of copper. Copper, it's a metal. When it reacts with oxygen, it will produce copper oxide. Magnesium also is a metal. When it reacts with oxygen, it will produce magnesium oxide. So, answer them in your notebook. And after that, check the answers from this page. Now we are going to start with a new lesson, 6.4, preparing metal hydroxide. Now, I think that you don't know what you mean by metal hydroxide and you did not hear before about preparing metal hydroxide. So, let's understand what is a metal hydroxide. So metal, as we know, that we have metals, semi-metals and non-metals from the periodic table. And hydroxide, it's one of a group that we studied before, hydroxide, OH. OH, it's a group of hydroxide. So here metal hydroxide actually is divided into 3 types depending in its solubility. So if the metal hydroxide is highly soluble in water, like group 1, so LiOH, lithium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, all of them are highly soluble in water. So it's the first group, first type. The second type is slightly soluble in water. That means they react with water, but not as first group. So magnesium hydroxide, it's soluble in water, but not as lithium hydroxide, for example, or sodium hydroxide. And calcium hydroxide also the same. It's soluble in water, but not as sodium hydroxide. And the last group is insoluble. So this group will make a precipitate. So in this group, the hydroxide is called a precipitated hydroxide, like copper hydroxide, because copper, it's not soluble, so it will precipitate. So copper hydroxide, zinc hydroxide, aluminum hydroxide, all those are insoluble. So when they react with solutions, they will make a precipitate. So let's see this example. Or before the example, what is the precipitation reaction? So precipitation reaction, the reaction in which an insoluble solid is formed. As we said before, that here we have insoluble solid, which we called it precipitate. When this insoluble solid is formed, when 2 solutions are mixed and react together. So we have 2 solutions, they react together. So one of the product will be insoluble solid or precipitate. So in this example, we have copper nitrate solution and sodium hydroxide solution. We said that sodium hydroxide is highly soluble. So when it reacts with copper nitrate, they will react to make copper hydroxide. So copper will react with hydroxide to make a precipitate, and sodium will react with nitrate to make another solution, which is sodium nitrate solution. So if you focus here in the picture, you will find that the color of the precipitate is light blue. So when copper nitrate reacts with sodium hydroxide, that will produce a light blue color precipitate. Okay, now here we have different chemical reactions. So complete the following equations. Let's start with the first one, aluminum nitrate, calcium nitrate, iron nitrate, magnesium nitrate, and calcium nitrate. All of them react with sodium hydroxide. So when aluminum nitrate react with highly soluble sodium hydroxide, sure, aluminum direct will react with hydroxide and sodium will react with nitrate to produce aluminum hydroxide and sodium nitrate. Then calcium nitrate and sodium hydroxide, they will react to produce calcium hydroxide, which is the precipitate, and sodium nitrate. So the precipitate here is calcium hydroxide. Then iron nitrate, when it reacts with sodium hydroxide in third reaction, iron direct will precipitate as iron hydroxide because it's insoluble hydroxide, and sodium nitrate solution also will produce. What about magnesium nitrate? Magnesium nitrate, when it reacts with sodium hydroxide, magnesium will react with hydroxide to produce a precipitate, which is magnesium hydroxide, and solution of sodium nitrate. The last reaction, calcium nitrate and sodium hydroxide, they will react to produce calcium hydroxide and sodium nitrate. So please write those equations in your notebook and try to complete them alone. Then check your answer from this page. Now, the last thing, the scientists use this reaction, precipitation reaction, just to differentiate between iron 2 and iron 3 because of the color of iron 2 and the color of iron 3 hydroxide precipitate. So if you look at the pictures, you will find that the first one has a precipitate, gray color of the precipitate, and the second one, brown color. So the color of iron 2 hydroxide precipitate is black or gray, but iron 3 hydroxide precipitate color is red or brown. So by using a precipitation reaction, we can differentiate between iron 2 and iron 3 hydroxides. So let's watch this video to see how they react iron hydroxide with sodium nitrate. The first precipitate, which is gray, and the second one, which is red or dark brown. Thank you for listening. Please study the lesson at home and try to find the equation or complete the equations alone. Thank you.